The only people who don't want to disclose the truth are people with something to hide.
And I am just delighted to have this opportunity because, as you allude to, this is a subject that does not make it into America's living rooms and parlors. It's not considered polite conversation.
It is. We are, and good morning, and that's the voice of our guest. Good morning, everyone. It's Tuesday, June the 12th, 2012. I'm Peter Boyles. This is Radio Free Denver, good old 630 KHOW. KHOW weather, cloudy, increasing clouds, I should say. 85 will be the high, 54 tonight, and tomorrow 92 degrees. Please say good morning, and I sure hope this is not her last appearance on the show. I've been reading about her, and I witnessed that interview with Frank Gaffney, the founder of the Center for Security Policy. We put that up. They did an hour-long interview on the eligibility of the president. And please say good morning to Diana West. Good morning, ma'am. Thanks for coming on the show.
Good morning, Peter. Thank you for having me on.
It's my pleasure. A bio quickly and some of your background, where we're speaking to you from.
I'm in Washington, D.C. I am a longtime weekly columnist, syndicated now through Universal. I'm also author of The Death of the Grown-Up, How America's Arrested Development is Bringing Down Western Civilization. And I think that the subject today is a perfect manifestation of that book, which was actually written in 2007.
Yeah. Education, background, where you grew up, those kinds of things.
Well, I grew up in Los Angeles, and then I took an airplane and went to Yale, where I graduated with a degree in English, and then became a writer and have just been writing at different publications since. And now I'm independent. I write my weekly column. I don't really have to answer to anyone at this point, except editors who may or may not choose to run my work.
How are you being received right now by the so-called MSM or the traditional media for taking the stances that you have been taking?
Well, whenever I write about the eligibility issue, which really is a much better way of describing this problem than the slur of birther, which doesn't really mean anything except that somebody wants to end the conversation, I am not. Many of my regular outlets do not even run the column.
Yeah.
So I would say that's a pretty good bellwether of how the subject and how I'm appreciated whenever I take that step. And going through that, I understand. You become sensitized to the notion, even when you are determined to write about something, you are definitely aware at the back of your head, well, they're not going to run this, and it's not good for you. And so I understand that influence that drives all people who are in this business and in other positions that are relevant to the issue, which would be politicians and so on. It's almost like a strange exaggeration of a high school hothouse atmosphere where you are judged on ridiculous criteria. But that's the state of journalism and politics.
I could have not said it better. I sense it all the time in terms of this radio show and the questions we get to ask, and it's you don't respond to the obvious question. You simply attack the questioner.
Right.
And as we've learned now in Orwell's New World, here is that questions pertaining, if you would, to the eligibility are now racist.
Right. I have heard that argument as well. Which again is another way of just it's like a light switch, just turning off the brain and pushing people away. And this is really what happens when, in my case, when journalism becomes an ideological exercise. People are no longer, if they ever really were, but it seems a much more exaggerated situation now. People are pushed by their ideology or by their influences, their many different criteria having nothing to do with the pursuit of facts, in how they prepare their news pages, their columns, their reports, their questions. And it's a very dangerous situation because I think this is a very close mimic of a totalitarian system where the government is truly enforcing with stamps and scissors and black markers.
I
They're
agree.
enforcing a kind of censorship. We are now enforcing that on ourselves. We don't have to do it. We don't have to do it. There is no policeman making us do this, as there would be in a totalitarian system.
But there is a policeman, and the policeman is political correctness, and the policeman is the progressive mindset, and they, as we've learned from Orwell and learned from others, they become self-regulating.
Self-regulating, right, which is worst of all.
Absolutely.
The very worst of all.
Yeah, that's worse.
Yes.
Why is it, what prompts, for instance, locally, the Denver Post a weekend ago wrote 3 editorials, including their Kingpin editorial on Sunday, that named the 5 worst birthers, and I felt very good about being named number 1. But
oh, congratulations!
thank you very much. What prompts the Denver Post or these establishment news people to ridicule or demean anyone who attempts to connect the dots in Obama's story?
I wish I knew.
Mm-hmm.
I can only speculate. I'm appalled at hearing. I'd like to see that editorial. I think part of it, just speculating. I think that part of it is proving their bona fides in the gang, keeping the story down, keeping the hysteria whipped up against any kind of just rational, sensible attention to the facts as we know them. It's just part of the perpetuating the hysteria against it. And frankly, it reminds me most of all of something that we might read about in Salem in
the witches, yes.
Yes, the witches. Yeah. Keeping the crowds aroused with rage and ire against the supposed interlopers. Or
sure. I mean, you're saying this so well. We will put that. It was called The Rebirth of Birthers, and we invited this editorial page editor on the radio show, and he would not. He wouldn't even return our calls.
Oh,
but there was
It's
this cheap crap stuff. But I think when I ask this question to callers, most of our callers are not dumb enough to believe Barack Obama isn't concealing something, many things, some deep things, some dark secrets, or something. In other words, there's no one that I've spoken to in the last year and a half that doesn't believe that the man is at least concealing or telling different stories. Now, what that means is I don't know, but when you have the Brian Williamses of the world, or even for that matter, Bill O'Reilly, there's a new book out called Really O'Reilly, and we have that fellow booked for tomorrow. And remember, Bill O'Reilly said he had seen the truth, and then it got down to when pressed, well, his staff had seen the truth, and when they were pressed, they said they had seen the newspaper announcements, which we know don't hold up.
Right. I think that should be on a billboard somewhere, because that is usually the piece of circumstantial evidence that most people cling to, because it does, on appearance, seem absolutely ironclad, until you find out, as the Cold Case Posse did, that those newspapers regularly printed birth announcements of foreign-born babies, I believe Japanese primarily, and they have evidence that there was a set of twins, I believe, adopted children who were toddlers when their so-called birth was announced. So that evidence is actually no evidence, and that needs to be driven home.
It does say at home on Kapiolani, where Toot and Gramps lived, but we now know, because of the great work of Jerry Corsi and others, that a 17-and-a-half-year-old young woman takes a less than 10-day-old baby and leaves and goes back to Washington State. They were never at home. Neil Abercrombie, the governor, who said he saw the happy family together, he could not have done that. That was right. It was physically impossible. She was in Washington State, back in school, 18, and she never comes back to Hawaii until, of course, Barack leaves. The story in the book about going to the airport, it's not true.
Yeah.
And anyone with with room temperature IQ has figured that story is not true. None of those stories are true.
Right. And another thing about those stories, just the whole, just taking the truth of them aside, the conundrum of seeing a man who has written two books of autobiography by age 47, at the same time has not allowed any documentation to
No.
come out
No.
about that life he's so happy to tell us all about. I mean,
Yeah.
there's a very weird twist right there that also is a point of curiosity for people if they didn't have this huge movement to silence the story going on.
And again, it's CNN, it's Fox, it's NBC, it's ABC, it's CBS, it's New York Times, it's AP, it's Reuters, it's the Washington Post, it's the Denver Post, it's the, and the.
It's also all the conservative outlets as well.
Oh, I know,
With
absolutely.
the exception of WorldNetDaily.com and the American Thinker blog and some other places.
Why? I mean, the guys like the Denver Post editor, they really should be or could be the gatekeepers, and they're not. They become the gatekeeper, like in the Wizard of Oz, that looks out the
Yes.
window and looks out the big hole in the door.
Yes.
And
Well, they become protectors.
yeah. So, I mean, is there any doubt in your mind, and we'll get to the particulars, is there any doubt in your mind that this president has a history of telling different stories about his past, hiding documents, offering up fraudulent records, hiring law firms to block anybody looking or trying to seek anything out, hiding documents, and the wall, by the way, is crumbling. But do you have any doubt that this is not taking place?
Oh, I have no doubt that this is taking place. I have to pinch myself sometimes.
Yeah, but you're absolutely right. And the part, and we spoke about this yesterday here on the radio show, the watchdog role of the press.
Yeah.
This is a dishonor.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. This past weekend, the Washington Post started celebrating itself for 40 years past Watergate, and with some big pieces about how it was much worse than it really seemed, and an op-ed by former editor Leonard Downey talking about the end of investigative reporting and bemoaning this as a measure of cost cutting and so on. And it just reading it, knowing that the largest investigative reporting story is not being done by 99% of the media is just extraordinary experience. It's quite surreal.
Let me set up a question and pause for my traffic report. Ms. West, what's going to happen? I mean, this is my theory that we're playing this giant Texas Hold'em poker game, and the time is going to come when all the cards will be turned over and the money will be in the center. What is going to happen? I'm just thrilled she's on the show. Diana West is with us. Peter Boyles, 630 KHW. Ed Klein's coming on the radio show this morning. I'm Peter Boyles. He did the book The Amateur. Increasing clouds and 85 will be the high. Hot bikes tomorrow night, Thunderbird Roadhouse, 9709 West 44th Avenue. Let's get you into work. Here's the man. 22 after 6:22. We made it to a Tuesday morning, cloudy, 85, 54 tonight, 92 tomorrow. Just a tremendous guest. Diana West is with us, and we've never met. I've begun reading her, and I listened and saw that piece that she did with Frank Gaffney. She's a columnist, and she has now joined the league of the birthers. And you know what? I think when people call you that, I said, wear the jacket with pride. Have you seen these new signs for the back of your car that say birther on board? Have you seen those?
No.
It's classic. All right. So my question is, and it's all supposition, but how does this end?
Well, my theory at this point is, and I say this having spent about the last 3 years doing massive amounts of research into another situation where you had facts on the table and a huge wall of lies going on, and I refer to communist penetration of America in the 30s, 40s, 50s, and so on. That story didn't really come out until after the real relevance of it was over. And what I refer to is, of course, when some of the archives opened in the 90s in the Soviet Union, after the fall of the Soviet Union, when they opened briefly and selectively. And then we also saw some releases in America, the Monona archives, namely, and various FBI archives that have been declassified subsequently. again, selectively. And what I draw from that is that I do believe we will find the truth. I do believe that the facts will out. But my hunch is, if I were a betting man, I would bet that it all comes out to our satisfaction only after the real burn of the political fight is over, and indeed when it becomes more or less an academic question. So I think that the stonewalling will be successful and will continue in the next 4 years, regardless of which president we have, and that when it finally comes open, somehow I think that we might feel. I think we will feel vindicated by what the documents show or what the non-documents don't show, but I don't think we're going to get it in any meaningful time frame.
Do you think that anything will happen between now and November that would be of significance?
Yes, I think it will. I think many things may happen. I think many things have happened already that are of astonishing significance that should have already led to
An example of what you mean.
impeachment proceedings.
Yeah.
An example?
Yeah.
Just there are so many examples. There is a piece of internet imagery that is to most clear-eyed assessments a fraud sitting on the internet purported to be the birth certificate of the United States.
You're talking about the PDF file.
Yes.
Yeah, I agree
That
with you.
in itself is certainly has the potential, if it were actually acted upon and truly investigated by the Congress and truly called out by the media. That, of course, could topple a president, could lead to impeachment proceedings, if not also a fraud prosecution. So it isn't that these things haven't happened, but in terms of the gotcha revelation, I would say there could be a dozen, but it unfortunately, I don't believe it's going to break through. Even if it leads to his defeat somehow, even if it plays a part in enough people's minds so that he is not reelected, in terms of actually coming to a conclusion, I don't think it's going to happen.
Well, one of the roles of the press, I used to believe, was to seek the truth, to look for what people called secret documents and question everything the politicians have claimed or said.
Mm-hmm.
But now we're supposed to accept on faith everything that Barack Obama says, even though we do and can prove that story has changed numerous times over the years. So at what point does it stop making sense?
At what point does what stop?
Well, but does it, like I said, at what point for the average person does Barack Obama stop making sense?
Oh, well, for average people, and just I don't know if average is the right description, but just for people who are not infected by Beltway mania might be one way of saying it, who are not ideologically driven to protect Barack Obama. I think he stopped making sense today or yesterday or last year. I think that there's a lot of discontent in the land about him, and this plays into it. But again, I don't think that there is going to be I don't think that it will be that this fundamental flaw, this incredible wound that he's opened up with this fraud, is going to gain traction in the authority level. I don't think that the press, the politicians, and so on are ever going to echo what we are talking about today, and what Jerome Corsi and WorldNet Daily and a number of independent researchers have been coming up with. I don't think it's ever going to bust through to a level of common consensus in the elite, in the people with megaphones, in that layer of society. It will continue to be ignored, I think, and it will not be allowed into the debate.
It's not going to be,
even if it's sub rosa.
Yeah. I mean, I understand that you are inside the Beltway, and you're, maybe somebody could say, a media insider. I've been told by people that in Congress, people that are elected officials, senators, are all very much aware of this, but no one will do anything about it. Do you think that's true?
Well, I think certainly some people are very much aware of it. And I think that what happens is it's like whack-a-mole. If somebody pops up, like Representative Cliff Stearns of Florida earlier this year, merely mentioned something about he'd like to look or has been looking at examining the evidence, he got whacked by the press.
With Mike Kaufman here. I don't know if you
Mike Kaufman there.
So
there was
funny.
I can't. Yes, there have been several who just pop up on their head just a little, and instead of actually taking their role seriously, the responsibility they have seriously, and actually just forgetting that kind of criticism, actually using their power and doing something about it, they all fold. And I think that's actually a big difference between our period today and, say, the 1950s, where you actually had so many investigations going on into communist penetration. I read this little factoid relatively recently that they didn't have enough hearing rooms in the Congress. They were shuffling around. There were people in hallways. There were not enough rooms when they were trying to figure out what had happened in that infiltration that began under Franklin Roosevelt. They didn't have enough rooms, and I think that's such a statement of congressmen, many different committees in the Congress and the Senate looking into these problems, these terrific problems. They took it very seriously. Now, they were whacked, and as we know, and certainly Joseph McCarthy became the poster boy for this and suffered greatly for it, but they actually did do their duty. And they left a record for us now that would not be there otherwise. Our current crop, our current generation, reflecting the American people, it's not just these individuals of Congress, I mean, they reflect us. They are not doing their duty, and they are not leaving us a record. And so you and I, and the other people who are interested and curious and driven by this story, have to sort of wander around without any support.
Yeah, there's no. I need to pause one more time. Can you stay? Because you're great. I want to give you all the time in the world, please.
Well, I'd love to.
Yeah, I mean, we do. We sort of find ourselves in this lifeboat mentality with other people that are at least asking for the truth, as opposed to the Curtis Hubbards, the Denver Post, or the Nightly News with Brian Williams. And so you find yourself just drawn into this thing. But I said, is it just me? I thought the role of the press was to seek the truth and question everything that politicians claim. And yet here we are on blind faith, accepting what Barack Obama says, even though it's documented his story has changed many, many, many times. Hang on, please. We'll come back. And I want you to talk about the press and why aren't they? They're not even embarrassed. They're not even embarrassed about what they're doing. Our guest is terrific. It's about time you created some real excitement in the bedroom. It's an event you've been waiting for. It's Cinemax's one-year extreme savings garage sale extravaganza in Fort Collins or Denver. You might as well, because, by the way, this is also called the Made in America sale, since Cinemax produces a vast majority of everything they make with precision, with pride in Colorado and in the USA. Check out Cinemax, who is the originator, not the imitator, of most advanced sleep choices available today. Everything is on sale. Save 10 to 70% off store-wide digital air sleep models, 50% off power-based support setups, $1,500 off memory cell mattresses, $200 off high-tech fluid support, $300 off natural latex, $400 off USA bedroom collectibles, sheets, healthy sleep accessories. It's great. It's 3 days only, June 22nd, 23rd, and 24th. June 22nd, 23rd, and 24th, 530 West Elk Place, east or westbound on I-70, over or under I-25. There they are. Also, Highway 14 and I-25 in Fort Collins. 1-800-INTERMAX for great instructions. It's INTERMAX, great sale. It's KHOW Radio. It's 6:37, 23 minutes before the hour. 6:30 KHOW. Cloudy 85, 54 tonight, 92 tomorrow. Hot bikes tomorrow night. And exercise or even doing something simple like walking up the stairs is painful because of a bad knee or a bad hip. Swedish Hospital's free community seminar Wednesday, June the 20th. The seminar features Swedish medical experts. Ask your questions to orthopedic surgeons who answer your questions. You think you need a hip or a knee? Get your questions answered on Wednesday, June the 20th, from 6 until 8 p.m. Swedish Med Center. Go to KHOW.com to register for the seminar or call them at 303-788-5000, 303-788-5000. Diana West is our guest. Again, she is another, I think, stand-up person who has joined this fight to ask the questions, that the Obama campaign really cannot escape, but simply are covered up for by the traditional media or the MSM. When, again, I began the show with this, and I need to come back to it again. Aren't these people embarrassed at all by what they're doing? I cite the Denver Post, and you've had a chance to read that editorial. And why are they acting like this cabal? Why are they all acting in concert?
They are a cabal. I go back to the press conference that Donald Trump gave after the initial release of the Internet birth certificate, if you remember that back
Sure.
in April 2011. The first question from the press waiting for Donald Trump, who, if you remember, of course, was at that moment considered the non-declared presidential frontrunner. He was tied with Huckabee or even more ahead of Huckabee in the sort of early presidential polls at that time with this birth certificate issue and his other attributes. The very first question to him from the waiting press, they were waiting for his helicopter to come down, I think it was in New Hampshire, they said, "You're taking credit, but a lot of people saying what you caused was a distraction."
Yeah.
I mean, that's not a question from a reporter. That's a question from the Praetorian Guard.
Sure.
What are you doing to harm our leader? I mean, it's one of the most incredible. If I were ever a journalism teacher, which is sort of an interesting idea, that I would go to that press conference because the questions there, the hostility, the rage that was directed at this man for whatever role he was able to play in pushing a piece of documentation onto us that we didn't have before, along, I would say, with Jerome Corsi's book, Where's the Birth Certificate, which was coming out at the same time. That's not a question or somebody who's looking for a story is asking. That's a question someone who's looking to enforce the narrative
Yeah,
is
but
asking.
again, the example I could give you is the editorial that appeared in the Denver Post called "The Rebirth of the Birthers," and like I said, they of all things they cite Jason Saltzman as a support group, but it gets worse. And so, like I said, you come to this moment that what prompts these people to ridicule or demean anyone who attempts to connect the dots of this man's history of telling different stories about his past, hiding documents, offering up records that could be fraudulent. Is it a bid to survive in an era when someone, I think it was Joseph Farah, said, when the gatekeepers can no longer control what Americans think?
Well, yes, but I think that it's a little it's smaller than that. I think that it's a club. They want to be friends. They want to have friends.
Oh,
they
I agree.
want to have. Pardon?
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, and I think that it's what you say to stay in the club. I mean, it really is juvenile. And when I talk about the death of the grown-up, this really is a situation where everybody is acting on a very sophomoric level. I mean, this really is a junior high school level of thinking and approaching things, always concerned about what not Joe Farah, but what
Sure.
Susie is going to say about you. What are they going to be nice to you? Are you going to be invited to parties? Are you going to get a
No,
good seat
I
at the press conference?
totally believe that, too. Can I go and play golf
sure.
at their course and can I be invited to their white wine parties?
It's also access because in Washington it's a very unhealthy thing. They will hold out the administration or other people that are supposed to be interviewed will keep access as a piece of candy, which you lose if you write unpleasant things. So that's going on as well all the time.
No, I truly believe that. I believe it happens here,
Sure.
just here and up and down the Front Range.
Anywhere,
Yeah, sure.
right.
So, unless you accept the online birth document image provided by the White House that numbers of people say is a forgery. Now, I'm not smart enough to know. I don't have any of those skills, but the questions remain unanswered.
Exactly.
And you and I mean, if we could make a list of things, in the list, if it was just one thing, you could overlook it, but it's literally, 30 things, 35 things. And you don't know this man's history. As I've said many times on this radio show, we know more about the life of Millard Fillmore than we know about Barack Obama. And that's not a big deal.
Right. It's not a big deal. And it does confound all logic processes, to sort of be living through this and watching this processional, and it's very depressing because it's so wrong. And when you say there, if it was one thing, we could overlook
Sure.
it. But remember, with George W. Bush, we had the one thing, the draft paper,
Sure.
that turned out to be a forgery. That was one thing that dominated the news because of what it suggested about his character, about his connections, and so on. And then you look at the just range, as you allude to, this range of documentation that's phony, sealed, hidden, missing. I mean, one of my favorites that I just came up with that I think Jerry Corsi writes about this stuff so often he barely even can probably assess the astoundingness of each item. But he mentioned a couple years ago that Barack Obama's mother's passport papers and so on are missing.
Absolutely.
Are missing until 1968.
Yep.
I mean, that in itself, that one item, which is a little removed from Barack Obama, his mother, is so telling and such a huge, point of departure for any kind of investigation or even just conjecture. I mean, it's amazing, but that, again, just washes right over everything.
Neil Abercrombie, the governor, who said that he had seen the happy family together. It's impossible. They were never together. I mean, she's gone. He never marries her. They don't live at Toot and Gramps' house on Kapiolani. That never happens. I was telling Ms. West off air about the Jason Saltzman Michael Huttner contest, that they were giving the round trip ticket to Hawaii for two plus a visit to the birthplace of Barack Obama, and they never awarded that prize to anyone. And this is the guy that Kurt Hubbard uses in his piece to back him up, as to quote Jason Saltzman. What's interesting is Saltzman told me, oh no, it wasn't him. It was Progress Now and Michael Huttner that ran the contest. Well, Progress Now, and I think everyone's allowed to critique whomever they want, but Progress Now is a politically correct, left of center sort of stalker girlfriend that hangs out around talk radio shows. They ran this. You know what? They've just given immunity for that. The people who are given immunity by the mainstream press are interesting, are they not?
I'm sorry?
I said the people who are given immunity by the traditional media are a really interesting group of people.
Yes.
So,
Well, it's an ideological divide, and that is essentially how the media maps out their work every day, whether they realize that. I'm not saying they're all consciously doing this. I think that the herd mentality is very strong, and the careerist, getting ahead mentality is probably stronger, and this becomes just the force of the movement. And what to me is most dispiriting is that people who are already ideologically or anti-socialist, anti-communist, pro-liberty, pro-free market people in this country, namely conservatives, are not more open to following up the requirements of the law, of rule of law, of all the things that would seem to form their life view, and giving the same issue a pass. I mean, I understand the media. I do not understand the conservatives, and I don't understand the conservative outlets, namely Fox and other places.
But Fox's point man is Bill O'Reilly.
Mm-hmm.
And I knew O'Reilly when he was here, when he was Bill Riley, before he became O'Reilly.
Oh, I didn't realize.
Yeah, he worked at Channel 7 here, and he was Bill Riley. But long story short, he went on his show, and then he had that great line where, Obama has this bizarre SSN from Connecticut. And O'Reilly went on his show and said, well, his father went to Harvard, and so he must have gotten him an SSN then. Well, first of all, Harvard's in Massachusetts.
Sure.
Second of all, Barack Obama gets that SSN when he's about 17 years old. Senior's
Right.
back in Kenya. He's not here anymore.
Yeah.
And so, but O'Reilly is able to just simply say those things. And that's why this interesting book's entitled Really O'Reilly. We're having the guy on tomorrow. And it's really interesting. He said, I heard that he had seen the truth. And then his staff had seen the truth. Then it gets down to the newspaper announcement. And as you pointed out, you can drive trucks through those holes.
Sure.
And we're supposed to, on that point, this is the $1,000 question, $64,000 question. What's the solution? We'll come right back. Diana West is with us, 12 minutes before the hour. Coming up, hottest book in the country. We have on the show great work by the Sheik. Ed Klein is on the show with us, and this book's getting tremendous attention. It's called The Amateur. 630 KHW, we are Denver's talk station. Traffic, here's the man. It's 6:55, 5 before the hour. Tomorrow, the book, Really O'Reilly. We'll do that tomorrow. And with us now, just a really special guest. Increasing clouds, by the way, today, says the KL Weather Center. 54 tonight and 92 on Wednesday. And hope she'll be back again and again and again. I watched her with Frank Gaffney. Her name's Diana West. We were talking about off air. We were having a conversation about how you become uninvitable to many social and media events once you've staked out some interesting questions on your column or on your radio show. And you are going through this. Plus, you've taken on Islam, too. So
Yes.
that's great. That's great. It feels good, though,
Very
doesn't
popular topics.
it?
Yes.
But it feels good. I mean, when
It does.
you either get uninvited or disinvited or not invited, and you see these invitations in the company mailboxes to all other media guys, and yours isn't there. You've done something right.
There you go.
All right. So we're gonna get you back again and again and again to go over the fine points of this. But what is the solution, do you think, of the unanswered questions in the president's life?
Well, I really think this is the power of the people. This is sort of the Hail Mary solution, because really we've exhausted, or they haven't been tried, but I think many avenues that are normal resolutions are closed to us. And I think the only scenario I could see in which you'd actually see action is if if people melted the switchboard at the Congress with calls wondering why Congress is not taking its responsibility seriously. We saw this actually work back during the Bush years with the amnesty or shamnesty bill, as it was called by conservatives. Pete, there was so much upset in the land that literally the switchboard was closed down by a volume of calls. Now, it's at this point it's hard to imagine that volume of calls making its way to Capitol Hill. But I think that, frankly, that is the only recourse we have at this point, is trying to put some backbone into our congressional representatives. They represent us. They're supposed to do the people's business. This is the most fundamental aspect of the people's business, assessing the legitimacy of the president's credentials.
Is there any doubt in your mind that this man is hiding something?
No. Of course he's hiding many, many things, which is the definition of fraud. He's hiding things in order to create or to put over a certain course of action and to create in us a certain course of action, and that is a definition of fraud, that kind of deception for a purpose.
And yet, everybody leaves him alone.
Right, and this is the other piece of the pie, which makes it such a difficult problem for us as a nation. The longer this goes on unaddressed, the more complicit everyone who's involved in the cover-up, and that would include legislators and media who are just not doing anything.
That was the smartest thing, I think, you're very bright, but you said that to me. You said it to me off air. The longer it goes, please say that again, Ms. West.
The longer it goes on, the more complicit everyone involved is and becomes. And so they increasingly get a stake in the cover-up. They increasingly become part of it because it reflects so badly on their behavior. Where were they when? What did they do during the war, Daddy? Nothing.
That's right.
Nothing. And so they, at a certain point, I'm sure there's a legal term for this, they become
malfeasance.
Part of crime. Malfeasance is probably malfeasance.
Can we get you on again next week? You're wonderful. I just enjoyed it. And thank you so much, and we'll talk to you next week.
Wonderful.
Thank you, ma'am. Columnist Diana West. On the other side, hottest book in the country, The Amateur. Edward Klein. Barack Obama in the White House. Hang on.